Hello everyone. Uh, this we are going to talk about Blazor, but before that, I just wanted to ask how many client-side frameworks are we using, or is anyone using client-side framework?
I think I am using that one.
Backbone. Anyone not using any client-side framework in their application?
Hardly there would be.
So there are very few projects which doesn't has any client-side framework. So what Microsoft, in fact, the Blazor technology that they are building is like there won't be need of JavaScript, or I can't say that there won't be need of JavaScript, but rather you don't have to write JavaScript. Um, since the .NET environment like .NET Standard and core libraries would be directly available in this technology. So how that works? Uh, online guys, if you have anything, you can just ask question. I'm having earphone as well. Okay. So how that works? WebAssembly is what? That this Blazor technology is built upon the WebAssembly. So the question is, what is WebAssembly? Anyone has idea? Have you guys remember? Do you guys remember about any plugins that we used to have with the browser in earlier days? There were a lot of plugins, like we had a Flash, then Silverlight, which was really popular for 3-4 years. So what happened to all of them? What was wrong with those things? There were a lot of security issues. There were a lot of incompatibilities between the browsers. The reason is simple, because those were not the standard to develop the application, web application. And even for that matter, we have the Java applets as well. But nowadays, I mean, we rarely build the application upon that. So WebAssembly is developed by W3C. It's a kind of a specification as HTML or CSS. So though they have created this specification, and what they have did is, since it's a specification, every browser would be able to utilize WebAssembly. So now, what actually is WebAssembly? They have created a mechanism or infrastructure to run the binary codes directly on the browser. So which opens a whole new world there. So what that native code would be like? It could be anything. I mean, the WebAssembly could be written in C++ as well. And in fact, there is one library available that you can run the C++ program on your web browser itself. So now we understood what is WebAssembly. It's more of all a way to run our binary codes. So now this standard could be implemented by anyone. It doesn't matter that this technology or we are working on .NET. So .NET stack could be working on that part. It's not the case. But Java, C++, any programming language, high-level programming language can be executed on WebAssembly. So uh, what made Microsoft that they came to this WebAssembly? It was kind of experiment process, and in fact, still it's a kind of experiment and very new technology or new development. And ideally, they are not speaking to run the develop the application on this Blazor right now. But if you can try it out and see how flexible is that and how fast we can develop with that with the Blazor technology. So the knockout, whoever has created knockout, he started with this experiment with the Blazor if we can have the WebAssembly for .NET. So he started it, and right now that is migrated to the Microsoft technology, and they have the community, and the codes are changing rapidly. I mean, it's like day by day, everyone is working on that part. But that idea evolved from there to run the .NET codes on WebAssembly. So now, right now, we have .NET Core, and we have .NET Framework as well. So we need a runtime to run our .NET codes, right? So Mono was from the beginning, they were like compatible with every operating system. So that is where the Mono runtime was created for to support this Blazor technology. And why the name is Blazor? Actually, we have the Razor in MVC, and Razor which runs on the browser. So that is where the Blazor word came. So that is where the Blazor came, and then that means we can write a Razor one, Razor CSS, normal CSS HTML, like we used to do on the MVC. So how this works? We have a lot of DLLs also. So it's really cool to see that DLL is getting executed on the browser itself. So what they have is this MSIL or the WebAssembly with whatever the DLLs would be there, and then we have this mono runtime which would try to execute these DLLs or the binaries that would be passed to the browser, and then it would run under the virtual machine, web assembly virtual machine, and then whatever the Blazor or the HTML parts and the CSS, everything would be rendered accordingly. So how that looks like? It looks like I'm using this learnblazor.com. I mean, there was pointless. I mean, without creating any slides or everything, because you already have information on this. So why to create slides? And we would talk about code only. I'm just trying to introduce what is what at first. Then we would jump into the code. So from here you can see, and one more thing, like WebAssemblies are supported on almost all latest browsers, but there would be browser which won't support WebAssembly, but they have the fallback, that is ASM.js something. So that would try to impersonate those things and try to emulate those things and run without WebAssembly also. So there are workaround, but you can't guarantee that it would be 100% compatible. So this could be our main application, that Blazor pages, and then you would be having all the DLLs that would be required under that application or that DLL. And the runtime would be these two guys with the WebAssembly mono runtime, and this should be just a helper for those things. So let's try to build application. I'm going to how to create the application in Visual Studio. So you would need Visual Studio 15.7 or prior to that one, above to that one. Otherwise, it won't work out. So this is the main home page for the Blazor, and we are going to click get started. So that is what it says. You need Visual Studio 27 pin with 15.7. And the next thing you need to install is this Blazor language service extensor. Certainly you can create in Notepad also. There is no need of ID, but since if you are going to use Visual Studio 2017, this would be really useful that you would get template and everything by default. So I have already installed this one, and I do have the Visual Studio 2017. So we are just going to look into the what all things are available in this template. And afterwards, I've created a CRUD operation like to manage few things, and then we would be looking into how we can have a JavaScript call from the server and from client to server with the Blazor technology. So I'm just going to create a .NET application. I just prefix everything with the TMP so that it would be easy to remove those. So by installing that extension, you would get this Blazor template there. So I'm just going to create a new application without doing anything. Oh, okay. So the application is created. Let's first try to run it, and we would see what all features are there in the default template. Then we would jump into the code base. Half of the time is wasted by just waiting for Visual Studio to run the application. Come on. Okay, let it run. We can discuss few things in the meantime. So, like in every .NET application, we have the startup and the program. Like usual, the program would be our primary item there. So this has extension method like everything is followed in .NET Core where default Blazor would be initialized with all the options required for the Blazor runtime and Blazor environment. And the startup is going to have just a single line of code to initialize the main component. It's all based on the component structure only, but we don't have to follow the code pattern. So, So this just registered our main component, that's all. And when we have a look under the app CSS HTML, this is just, you can think it as assembly, and then the component would be, the main component would be this app CSS HTML, where it would be just trying to initialize our main program. That's it. And you would be able to see the same case with the view imports that we have in the MVC application too. Okay, the program ran. Okay, here is the program, and what I'm going to do is, since we are fan of Chrome, let's have a few things. So let's see first what all things are available here. I'm going to hard reload things again. So you can see what all things are available over here. This is my index HTML call only, like whatever I have referred under the index HTML, those are getting rendered. But apart from that, you can see the mono WebAssembly, and then this is the runtime environment that mono gives, and the helper like these two guys, Blazor and the mono.js, to have some helper for those items. And these are the DLL files that we have in referred in under this one. So these are the basic core libraries itself. Now, if we have a look on any of the libraries, you can see this is just a get one, and then we have this binary codes there. All right. So, and you can see what is the size of these items. It's really, really small, and they are working on optimization and everything, uh, so that it would be kind of bundled up and tried to serve as a single unit. But still, it's good enough. And then, like usual application, we have this click me. Okay, so we have this example, like we whenever we create Angular or the uh, Redux application, React application, we get this thing, and you can see there is no network calls are being made for those things. I'm just clearing this out. So this is just on the client end side, and then we have the fetch data, which is rendering me this few items, and then it is making a Ajax call to get the temperatures or weather records for uh, as a JSON data. That's it. But our HTML are being placed on the client end side, so no HTMLs are being served by server, right? Any doubts so far? So I just demonstrated till now, like what all things are there with the default template. So by quickly looking into the pages, this is our counter CSS HTML, and let's first see the navigation of those items. So the first thing is, like, we have a navigation link. This is just like predefined HTML from ASP.NET, and then we have the href and counter. So if we jump into any of them, the CSS HTML, it basically works with the CSS HTML, and your codes are going to be written under those only. So if we look into this, this is our URL href thing. So this says this is a counter, and if we see the navigation of that, it goes and see this URL gets changing. So that is the only thing we have to do, and this is all about the HTML that you want to have. And is it visible to all of you? Fine now. So this is our URL. This is the code that you can write, and you would get the intelligence and everything from here. So what it is doing is on click, it is just increment count is getting called, and it is current count is increased. So that is where the state is getting changed, and it is quickly reflected on the view itself. So you have seen that there is no code at all. I mean, yeah, JavaScript code, and we would be having all kind of intelligence and everything under a Microsoft framework. And then if you see, we have to do loading kind of status. Like when I click on this, loading is coming and then the data is coming, right? So we usually have some kind of interceptor for in under Angular or something to make those things work. But over here, you can see this is, I am going to do F12. This is my array, and then this is event, like we used to have on the web forms. So on initialization, I'm just getting the data from the JSON, and then we are populating this forecast. That's it. And class itself is being defined over here, but no need to define over here. You can have all kind of complex things on your solution. Like you can have a multi-layer architecture, no problem with that. You can keep that model there itself, but that would work fine. Okay. So uh, now at the code level, we are just checking if it is null, then we have a loading status. Otherwise, it's just rendering things up in for each loop. That's all. We are good. Any doubts so far? Okay, so we can have some kind of sub component also. Like we have sub component in Angular or React, or even for that matter in MVC as well. So in similar way, you can have that too, and you can pass. This doesn't has any URL, as you can see from here. And but in this situation, we can just pass it title from some other component to render things up. That's all. So this is calling the survey prompt with the title. That's it. One more thing under triple W root, and if we see index HTML, this is just an HTML where we are having the Blazor assembly, which is trying to load the stuff. So it's simple page index.html. And then we have this assembly reference. And once that executes, everything is getting chained up. So that is how everything is loading. Okay. So far so good. Going to close this one, and I'm going to run a different application that I had created for showing few more examples. So in real life, our situations are not as simple as that, but with this thing, so you can have as complex as you want. So you can see multiple layers over here. We have the model API and the demo layer. So this I mean, not main application. So we have this book model. I'm going to have a CRUD operation on the book entity itself, and this is just a demo one for the weather forecast. And if we look into the API, I have created a RESTful book API, which is going to have get with ID. Then we have this post put. So it's a general, no need to explain it. It's just a simple thing, which is having the RESTful architecture with for the book CRUD operation. That's it. And then I am having the sample data controller, which is going to get the weather forecast. That's all. So this again is having API sample data. In that we were loading JSON, but over here we are just getting it through a controller, and I'm having the data passed as a time there. So which would just randomly populate weather forecast. So that's it from the API. And the crazy thing is, from the API application, we would be able to run the Blazor application. So you can see this is my entry point of application set as a startup is being done. So by running this, I would be able to call the Blazor demo as well. So how that is done is, on the startup, you have to just write this thing, and use Blazor would be you have to use one of the NuGet package, Microsoft ASP.NET Core Blazor.server. So once that is done, you just have to register this thing so that you don't have to run two hosting or two domains. Okay. So I'm going to run the application, then we would see what all features are there. In the meantime, while it's running, we can talk about some more codes. This one seems to be fast. Okay. So this is same example that we had seen for the weather forecast, but in this one I have modified few of the things, like I have passed the parameter over here. So even for passing the parameter, it is as simple as this one. And over here, I'm just specifying that it has to be a date time of type, like typed routing we have on the web API itself as well. So in similar way, this would work also. And the other cool thing about is you can have your DI available over here. So if you have services or anything, you can just refer that class or at this place. That's all done. So you had seen the API that I had shown you. That API is going to be called from here. I'm getting the forecast, which is again array, and then I'm populating the values from that API call, right? And then whatever the date is coming, I'm just having I'm formatted date to pass that thing. Is it trend now? I guess so. Yeah, we are. So this is going to be same as that one. So counter remains same, and we change the weather one. So we had two routing. The first is the general routing, and in that we are going to have the default parameter datetime.now. So that is where it's showing for relative to today's date. And then when we click on this, you can see the routing is getting changed there. So it's just a dummy implementation, but by passing the date value. So what we have to do for those things are, uh, this again is kind of event one. And then whenever we get the set parameters for the default, whenever it's getting initialized for the first time, I'm passing that value so that it should get rendered. but from the next time onwards, I'm having the data ready for it. I mean, whenever we are passing through the URL. So that is how it's working. And then we have to have this parameter implementation over there so that it gets gets initialized from this top level thing. Okay. So any doubts so far? We talked about weather forecast. We would jump into the CRUD operation. Okay. Any doubts? We are good? Okay. And over here, you can see the parameters that we are having. So I'm just adding 5 days and over here just with the date formatting so that it gets formatted date, and when we click, it would have the related value. Okay. So now let's look into the book implementation. So there we have, this is all Blazor application one day, and you can see, perhaps I shall open it. So I'm just going to clear these out. I'm going to click on this one. Let's say we update something. So what's going to happen is just our API is getting called, right? So no HTML thing is involved, and even if for the creation of it, so that this gets cleared out, and we have a new data entry over here. And also, like, this doesn't mean anything, but it gets displayed over here. I mean, it's a small thing, but we would see how those things are managed. And codes are really, really simple. We don't have to work so much hard with this. So I'm just having a one view that is list.cshtml. And let's first look into what we have over here. So we have books, which is going to store the list of books. And then we have the edit book, which book we are going to edit. And then we have the add book. Okay. So these are 3 items through which we would be having our application or the rendering thing ready. Now, by just having these 3 items, we can have a look on what all things we have on our HTML. So I'm just using name of, that is new operator in C sub 6.0, I guess, with C sub 6.0 they had introduced. So I'm just going through the books, and then I'm just having the book dot title and everything. And now in this condition itself, if I'm having edit book ID equal to something same, so mainly I'm checking based on the if ID is similar, then I would have it in the edit mode. So there is our two-way binding, that it would impact in two-way. So there I'm having bind and the edit book item there. The next thing to notice is we have the edit command and the update command. So the update command I'm passing the ID and the edit book. So there our edit book type is already populated. We don't have to worry about it.
So the moment we edit it, it shows that
Yeah.
URL is set.
Yeah, we just have to call the API, that's it, done. And in similar way, this is a func implementation itself, so that you can do multiple things there. And for add, we have the add command. So basically, we have the event available there, and those events would be defined at this place. So on init, we are populating all of data, the whole book listing, and then on update command, We got the book ID, we got the edit book ID, edit book. So there we are just having a simple call to put our JSON with the ID and the values of those. So our values are being self-populated. We had not done the pulling up all the input control and putting all the values into the model. So all gone now.
The Ajax and the compost has been replaced by the SQL.
Yeah. I mean, this thing is internally taken care by this mono WebAssembly, and that is just having the Ajax call. So now everything is done. Like I'm updating our local book, and then I'm making it edit book equal to null so that it doesn't get into the edit mode, because our rendering is depending upon this thing. So once there's success, I'm just nullifying this thing, and I'm updating the local book that we have. So add command is fairly simple. We have add command, and whenever something is added, I'm just adding into the variable, that book's global variable. And edit command is just edit command so that it gets into the edit mode. So that is where there's nothing over here. I'm just specifying edit book equal to my current, that's it, so that it gets opened into edit book. So to quickly summarize this thing, so this is our add command, which is relatively simple, where we click and this gets executed with the entity. And when we click on this one, we update the value, the ID is getting passed, then the whole model without writing any extra piece of code. And then once update is done, it's nullifying that item so that this gets rendered into usual way. So there isn't anything at all.
It will be interesting to think of how complex it can be.
Yeah. So now we have covered CRUD operation, and it looks like we can develop applications through Blazor. Now, it's not always in the current environment, I mean, current situation, that without writing any JavaScript code, we would be able to develop the application, because this is simple list, grid, and everything, which is going to work fine. But if we need a drop down list like auto suggestion and everything, then we have problem, because those kind of controls are not available yet into the Blazor. And that has its own reason, like it's still primitive and people are working on that part. If let's just suppose that one day Kendo came in and they said that we have the components ready for the Blazor, that is going to be end of JavaScript, because once they support it, we would be having full-fledged controller and we don't have to worry about anything else. Now, yeah, looking into this communication between the JavaScript from server side to JavaScript and from client side to JavaScript. So there we would be having that JS or TypeScript call. So there are few things like, let me first show you an example. I'm having this search HTML, which this is a combination of both uh, the client side work and the Blazor thing that we have used. So this is just a general, this is my ID input one, which is having certain ID search title. And in general way, the way we were looking into all things, we have the book equal to null, then it would be loading. But if book is available, then we are going to just render those things up. That's all. But if we look into the code level, we don't have anything. Set book ID is there, which is being JS invocable. That attribute would allow that to be called from the JavaScript. So whenever this gets called, our book state is going to be changed. and then we have to call the state has changed. We still have problem with the rendering things. This doesn't knows when to render it up because this is going to be called from someone else. So so that is where we would be updating our book item book object, and then we are going to have the state has changed so that it renders this values again. Let's have a quick look on what it does. I'm going to play this call, and we had a book with the dotnet. So this gets values here. We don't have any Ajax call. I mean, not have Ajax call to render or JavaScript to have this rendering of things. This is being rendered by the Razor itself. As you have seen, the book is available. It's going to render things up, right? And what all network calls are there is based on the I'm using Kendo auto suggest. So this is having just API calls. If I show you from the JavaScript, what happens is after things gets rendered, I'm calling this thing search book. What it does is try to get the current JavaScript runtime, and it gets called the search book init, which is kind of function from the JavaScript, and the search title, the ID that I'm passing, which is from here. And then I'm having the object reference of this class. I'm going to explain a bit more about it. So we have this thing, and on TypeScript level, or for that matter, just have a look on the app.js. So at this level, we have this autocomplete where I'm having the book title and ID with whatever items are there. And then we have the API book, which is going to call our the main API to get all the books, right? So that is going to render these things from the client itself. So whenever we type, it is going to come through the Kendo. And on select, what is going to happen is I'm just calling the invoke method with set book ID and the data item that I'm looking at, which is the ID from this book, the selected book ID.
So only if it marks that specific role ID. Like in the automatic, like I have a suggestion.
Yeah.
Every time I select, that uses that ID and
passes to a server side. So the server side call is this thing, set book ID, and the book ID that we are getting. And then I'm calling the book ID to get the latest value from my API, and I'm changing the state of it, which is rendering things up. This is clear. Any doubts on this level? How this is getting called? So mainly, to sum it up, mainly we need to have the JS invocable, and once that is done, you would be able to execute call this method from the client end side only. And then we have on after render, which is supposed to be executed after the rendering of the DOM elements are done. So from here, once things are done, I'm just calling my JavaScript. So in this situation, this .NET object reference is kind of instance based. So this is where I am passing the current instance of this thing, because how if you understand how the client would call the particular instance, it would be kind of global call, right? In general terms, if we call from the client to the server side, in general server client architecture, it is going to be called like global thing, but we cannot apply it on the instance because this instance is associated to me, whoever is calling that thing. So that is where the .NET object reference is being passed, so that I'm going to have interaction with this object itself. So this is why on the app.js, I'm having the search book, which is this thing, and I'm having the init function. If you remember, this thing searchbook.init, which is having this function called, and then I'm having selector and the reference of that guy, right? So once I have this, I'm just calling this function with the dotnet helper, and this dotnet helper is allowing me to call that function. So this is what they call as JsInterop, and this was a bit trickier in the earlier version, but with this version it's much more simplified. So I'm done with the demo. I think we completed in 45 minutes. That's a good thing. So any doubts or any thought process you guys are having, want to share? Anyone from the online? We are good then? Thank you. Thank you, everyone.